Everyone knows winter is the real mess maker. You don't need WeatherTech floor liners for summer, unless you hit the beach and half the beach ends up back in your car, or the campsite dirt ends up in your trunk. Then you'd want a cargo liner. Or a road trip goes sideways, lemonade spills, ketchup goes rogue, ice cream drips. Yeah, you'd be pretty happy about those WeatherTech seat protectors. So just to be clear as the mud you're inevitably going to step in this summer, you don't need WeatherTech. Unless you plan on doing summer. Visit WeatherTech.com today.
The impact of George Soros prosecutors. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. We've all heard the term before, George Soros prosecutors. George Soros bought and paid prosecutors. And just because George Soros is stepping away and allowing his son Alex to take over a good portion of his philanthropic efforts, and that's air quotes around philanthropic, right? It's more political activism, more socialist, communist political activism. But just because he's stepping away doesn't mean the impact, the effects, the negative impacts and effects of his funding over the years of local districts, attorney offices, of local prosecutors' offices, of local Commonwealth's attorney offices. It doesn't mean those effects have dwindled down. In fact, we're still suffering them. We're still suffering under the impacts of George Soros bought and paid prosecutors failing to do their duty and allowing murderers to walk the street. Murderers to walk the street who are actually illegal immigrants and shouldn't be in the country in the first place. And if you try and raise these concerns to local Democrat, in most cases, run boards, or local Democrat politicians, or state or federal politicians, Democrats are always quick to sidestep the issue and pretend it doesn't exist. But once again, in Virginia, another murder by an illegal alien who shouldn't have been in the country in the first place, but now somebody has died because the local district attorney, the local prosecutor, turned blind eyes to the many warnings, the dozens of warnings he was given about this murderous individual, alleged murderous individual. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California, RLN. Bold and Blunt has been featured among its esteemed lineup for a very long time now, I'm happy to say. So if you're looking for a little faith perspective to your news, that's where you want to go. You may also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page there and find the newsletter section. Click on it and find Best of Cheryl Chumley. Click on that and enter your email address, and you'll get delivered to your email box. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, my newsletter containing my commentaries, my audio, Bold and Blunt. And now I'm happy to say my usually weekly video Bold and Blunt as well. My last two, you don't want to miss those. Bill O'Reilly and Troy Miller, two great interviews. They're all great, but you know these names, so check it out. You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, a couple years ago, when the George Soros-backed DAs and Commonwealth's attorneys and prosecutors were really making the news, they put together this report, this 17-page report called Justice for Sale, because that's exactly what's going on here, right? You've got this billionaire leftist that detests all things American exceptionalism, detests the idea of law and order and the Constitution and limited government and rights coming from God and government only being in place to preserve and protect those rights and hates border controls in particular. You've got this billionaire, George Soros, who is, for years now, for a good decade, really been funding local DA races. These races used to be, I mean, if you had $10,000, you could run for this office. They really were, barely made the news in local newspapers, barely made the news. But because of George Soros injecting hundreds of $1,000s into these races, in some cases upwards of $1 million, to bring to office candidates that would do his justice reform bidding, which is to say that they would not pursue criminals based on the crime, but they would only pursue those criminals who met the narrative of the far left. For instance, black men don't commit crimes unless an equal number of white men commit crimes as well. So if you have jails that are filled with minorities, it's not because the minorities are committing more crimes than white people. It's that white people are being allowed to skirt justice because of their skin color. So the narrative is that white people commit as many crimes, they're just not punished for it. And so George Soros would find people who would do his bidding on that. And so when a case would come before the local prosecutor's office, the local prosecutor doing George Soros' bidding would refuse to prosecute. So you would have these criminals roaming the street, criminals with not just little petty theft records, right, but serious hardened multiple offending criminals that shouldn't have been in the country in the first place, because adding to their criminal behaviors, they're also in country illegally. They're also illegals. So they should have been tossed back across the border. But George Soros didn't want these people to be prosecuted. He wanted white men, white young men in particular, to be prosecuted. So he would fund these local races to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. And now we've got communities across America where law and order are not being upheld because the local prosecutors' offices, bought as they are by George Soros' money, are turning blind eyes to crime. Justice for Sale, as I said, is the name of the report. Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund put this out. Here are some bullet point statistics from this report. The United States currently has at least 75 Soros-backed social justice prosecutors supported through campaign dollars and or Soros-funded progressive infrastructure groups. And by progressive, we mean communist, right? These are card-carrying Marxists. They just want to destroy the concept of law and order so they can destroy America's Constitution and destroy America from within. Because if you have a nation that is lawless, then you have a nation that is just one short step from utter chaos and total clampdown by the government. All right, next bullet point. These 75 prosecutors represent more than 1 in 5 Americans, or more than 72 million people, including half of America's 50 most populous cities and counties. So George Soros wasn't just funding anybody, right? He wasn't just, if you happen to be running for local DA, the funding from George Soros wasn't automatic. You know, he's not funding the hayseed counties that represent like 7 people. He is specifically selecting those areas, those communities, those offices where it can have the most impact, where he can get the most leftist-leaning DA influence over the largest amount of people, the largest number of people, the largest population. And so, success to him, right? Now, George Soros-backed prosecutors represent more than 72 million people, more than 1 in 5 Americans, including half of America's 50 most populous cities and counties. All right, 3 more bullet points. From 2018 to 2021, in that 3-year period, Soros spent $13 million on just 10 prosecutors' races, where his organizations were by far the biggest spender in the race and comprised the majority of the progressive candidates' campaign spending, as much as 90% in some cases. See, that's what I was saying. These little tiny offices, they used to be, a few thousand to run a campaign. You get a few flyers, you post a few posters, and that would be it. You'd get elected. Most people didn't even know what their local DA did, never mind go out and vote for him or her. Well, George Soros has turned these into multi-million-dollar campaigns. And so if you are somebody who just wants to run for this office and has no knowledge of George Soros's dollars being injected into your competitors, your opponent's race, then you're going to be taken off guard, right? All of a sudden, your little $10,000 campaign coffers are just going to be swallowed up with $13 million on just 10 prosecutors' races. Unbelievable, right? And the thing that's really a slap in the face to Americans, to American citizens, and it should be to Americans no matter what your political beliefs are. The thing that's the real slap in the face is George Soros doesn't live in these communities, and yet he is influencing these communities in real very crucial, significant ways. He is influencing how law and order and the justice system goes forth in a community in which he has absolutely no stake. He doesn't have to deal with any consequences. He doesn't have to deal with an illegal alien who crossed the border into America undocumented, illegally, snuck across, breaking laws right there, and then goes on to commit more crimes, thefts, robberies, property damage, rape, murder, right? Assaults, all that stuff. He doesn't have to deal with that. He just injects the money into the campaign and then flies off his merry way on one of his however many jets to whatever country he happens to be going to at that particular time, to stay in some 5-star hotel with his private security guard, private armed security guard, right? He doesn't have to deal with this. So every American, no matter what your political belief is, no matter how you vote, that should be a slap in the face to you, because your vote is being discounted. Maybe Soros represents something you believe in, but he still doesn't have to deal with the consequences of his funding atrocities. To date, next bullet point, Soros has spent more than $40 million on direct campaign spending over the last decade to elect prosecutors. So $40 million over 10 years to change how America's justice system goes forth. Last bullet point, Soros uses a series of shell organizations, affiliates, and pass-through committees to steer contributions to both candidates and his robust support network for progressive prosecutors, which provide gravitas and perks to preferred prosecutors. So he doesn't just have one organization where it's transparent, right? Dollars go to this guy, dollars go to that woman for office. It doesn't work that way with George Soros. He has a big umbrella organization, right? The Open Society Foundations. And through that, all this money gets funneled to A, B, C, D, all the way up to Z, and then repeat, right? Because there are hundreds of organizations that his foundations donate to and funnel money through and do business with, and then those dollars go to another organization, and then those dollars finally weave their way into political candidates that George Soros wants to see elected. So it's not even that. There's another face slap, right? Democrats always talking about transparency. We need transparency in government. We need get rid of big business, get rid of the big corporate donors, get rid of the super PACs. Well, not when it comes to electing their candidates, right? That's when Democrats are only too willing to turn blind eyes. Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton, he had this piece that he wrote in the Daily Wire. Every Soros prosecutor endangers American lives. That's sort of a serious headline, but May 20th, 2026, so just posted in the Daily Wire. But really, he makes some good points because he wrote this piece in response to a hearing that was held on Capitol Hill, of which he took part. I'm going to read part of this piece he wrote. In March, this is May 20th, 2026, and he's talking going back in time a couple months. In March, a criminal illegal alien, the senator writes, stabbed Stephanie Minter to death at a bus stop. Last week, her mother gave a strong and courageous testimony on Capitol Hill, speaking about her daughter's fierce faith in God, vibrant smile, and love for family. Sitting to her left was the man whose pro-criminal policies led to Stephanie's death, Soros-backed Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano. One of the group of 75, right? Funded by George Soros to turn blind eyes to crimes committed by those that the George Soros family want to protect. And with me today, I have a guest who is actually trying to fight back against all this George Soros funded law and order, meaning not law and order in local communities. Her name is Jennifer Harrison. She is the executive director of the Victims' Right Reform Council. Jennifer Harrison, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me and talking about these important issues.
Yeah, I'm very interested in discussing with you what is going on with the Fairfax prosecutor in Virginia. What's happening?
Well, it's not just in Fairfax. Every day in America, we wake up to another preventable murder. I mean, a lot of times, multiple in a single day. And these are not unavoidable tragedies. They are the direct result of policy decisions made by politicians, prosecutors, Soros-backed prosecutors like Steve Descano, and judges who have chosen ideology over public safety. And, I became involved in the Fairfax issues when Stephanie Minter, a mom, was murdered by an illegal immigrant who had been arrested and released by Steve Descano's office 30 times.
30 times.
30 times. And, Descano was warned in documented emails, which we forwarded on to the Department of Justice. We filed a complaint against him on behalf of the Minter family because enough is enough. And, for far too long, Soros-funded prosecutors, woke activist judges, and abolitionist politicians had been allowed to make these reckless decisions that endanger the public without ever being held accountable for the damage that they cause. And I had to hold Stephanie Minter's mom, Cheryl, up after a press conference that we had. I held her in my arms as she cried about her daughter. And let me tell you, that's a position nobody ever wants to be in. Steve Descano should have been there facing her. And they gamble with other people's lives. And when the worst happens, they deny, deflect, or pretend that victims never, like Cheryl, never existed. And the Victims' Rights Reform Council, which I am the executive director of, has found a way to finally fight back.
So just to lay it out in very layman's terms, a police officer may arrest a suspect for any number of crimes. In this instance, it was murder. But if a local prosecutor, a Commonwealth's attorney, as Steve Descano is, refuses to prosecute, refuses to bring charges, that suspect goes free, correct?
Yes, and we've learned, Steve Descano made campaign promises. He had it on his website, it's in memos, that he was going to use immigration status as a method of deciding what charges to bring forward, what charges to dismiss. And that's a violation of equal protection under the law. Stephanie Minter actually had addiction issues, and she went to jail Meanwhile, her killer, who was allowed only free, free 30 times to go on and kill her, faced no jail time because of his immigration status.
So, what are the facts for people who don't recall or don't live in Virginia, as I do? What were the facts of this case, this murder?
So Jala, the man who allegedly murdered her, and is facing those charges, was arrested and released 30 times. He's an illegal alien. The police sent emails warning Descano's office of his escalating and violent behavior. And they actually said in those emails that it was not an if, but a when that he was going to seriously harm or kill somebody. So he is in jail now. Steve Descano is finally prosecuting that case. But, it's too little too late. And, somebody's dead, because actually there are a couple of other people that one other case that we know of, I think, where somebody was murdered because Descano refused to prosecute that killer too, before it was too late, and before these families were, permanently grieving forever, and they're serving life sentences that Steve Descano doesn't want to hand out to cold-blooded killers. But the Victims' Rights Reform Council is now working with attorneys to file complaints with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice, seeking investigations into the policies, practices, and decision makers responsible for putting Americans in danger, like Steve Descano. We did file a complaint on Cheryl Minter's behalf, as I mentioned, that triggered an investigation. So we're looking forward to the outcome of that investigation. And we're going after every policy, every loophole, and every official who enables the system, including court structures that incentivize these dangerous decisions, and the nonprofits that fund and promote them. I don't know if your listeners are aware, but tragically, victims and their families have no legal path to sue those people that I mentioned, like Steve Descano, because they're protected behind an iron curtain of immunity. And, criminals have more rights than the people that they harm. So we can't sue them, but what we can do is demand investigations. And with investigations comes the truth, justice, and accountability.
It's very difficult to get into the mind of someone like Steve Descano, and I know that he is one of the prosecutors who was funded during campaign season by George Soros, correct?
Yes, he's what we call a Soros-backed prosecutor.
So it's very difficult to understand, in the face of so much tragedy, what possible justification they can give for freeing someone like this 30 times and then just appearing so cold in the public about the consequences of freeing such a guy. Do you have any insights into what goes on in Descano's mind, his internal office discussions?
I really wish I had an answer to that question, because I really want to believe that somewhere inside of these politicians, there is a human being, right? It's very hard to believe that these people have no soul and are just pure evil and don't care. I don't know if they, their talking points that we heard at the congressional hearing on that Steve Descano attended and testified to, was in the hot seat and squirming for quite some time. I don't know if the talking points that they keep repeat are what they tell themselves when they look in the mirror and try to make themselves feel better about what they've done. That Americans kill on an average more than illegals, or commit more crimes than illegals, or, but ICE but Donald Trump. I wish I had an answer, but it's gone on for far too long. The damage that they've caused is irreparable, and it really has to stop.
It's probably worth noting that you wouldn't be able to get as far as you are right now with the investigation of Steve Descano had Trump not won the White House and someone like Harmeet Dillon been at the helm of pushing for these investigations. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are so beyond grateful and appreciative for the decisive action that President Trump and his administration has taken to save lives in this country, not just by securing the border, but by enforcing the law and having an administration. Our system is based on checks and balances. And when these state and local governments do these kinds of things, we're supposed to be able to go to the federal government and ask for help. And that's why these laws are in place. And we're glad that we found this loophole and a method and a pathway and framework to get the Department of Justice involved and for Harmeet Dillon to open up these investigations. We also did, based on the fact that we were successful in triggering an investigation, we did file a complaint in Illinois against Pritzker and Chicago, Cook County and Lake County, and their patterns and practices and soft on crime policies, electronic monitoring data that, violent repeat offenders and illegal aliens are causing havoc and causing harm on the streets every day. So we would not be able to do that, you're right, without the Trump administration. And, him sending in the National Guard, too, for there to be no murders in D.C. for 2 or 3 weeks. So we don't even know how many lives he saved in those 3 weeks. But we are beyond grateful to the Trump administration for everything that they're doing.
So you said that victims, families of murdered people, they don't have any recourse to sue the prosecutors. And what a tragedy! What a tragic situation that must be. But the point of the investigations, then, I take it, is to put pressure on these prosecutors for failing to do their duties, and then citizens will become aware of their failures and not reelect them. Is that basically what the end result could be?
Yeah. You know what? To be honest with you, I'm a one-woman movement right now, and I was joyful, and it was unexpected that we were even going to trigger the investigation. So I didn't even get so far as to think about what the outcome could be. But there are a lot of ways that the federal government can step in and try to stop some of these patterns and practices. They might be able to sue Toscano or other jurisdictions that are participating in this. And there also might be some criminal liability in there, as far as also civil liability. So, we know that the Trump administration, and especially Harmeet Dillon, is going to bring down the full weight of the law and might even be able to come up with some things that we haven't even thought of. And we are looking forward to that.
I'm sure you've seen Governor Abigail Spanberger's response to a couple of journalists who have asked her about her sort of sheltering embrace of illegals in the state of Virginia now, the Commonwealth of Virginia, given that I think the stats were the last 3 or 4 murders in a certain area of Virginia were committed by illegals. Did you see her refusal to address that?
And that's what happens, across the board, is they deny and they deflect and they pretend that victims don't even exist. That's the most important part of this, is that victims are being silenced. Families are being told that their loved ones were isolated incidents. Victims who speak out are accused of being political. And, many families feel abandoned by people like Spanberger and Toscano. And these are the people that were sworn to protect them. So it's a really sad situation. And I think that this is, I think she's only going to be a one-term governor.
Thankfully. Jennifer, you said you're sort of a one-woman force right now fighting for this. So somebody listening, maybe feeling the effects of a similar George Soros-funded prosecutor in their own state, in their own communities. Is there anything other people can do right now?
They could go to the victimsrightsreformcouncil.org or look us up on social media, Victims' Rights, Jennifer Harrison. We're all over the place. We have our donation links. And really, I hate asking for money, but money talks in this world. And that's really what we need right now. I really am a one-woman show. I don't take any salary right now. I work 45 hours a week managing a restaurant. I'm a single mom. And as a survivor of a homicide victim and somebody who lost the love of my life over 20 years ago, I just really have had enough, and I want this world to be a safer place for my son. So I'm out here fighting, and if you guys could support us in any way that you can, even $1 goes a long way. We would be extremely grateful for that. And also you can find our email addresses and contact information for any volunteer efforts that we might need in the future.
You don't take any money for what you do right now? You're not paid yourself? You're doing this? No. So if people want to donate, what would the money be used for? Is it to hire attorneys? Or, what exactly would you use the money for?
Well, right now we are looking for $100,000 in seed money, either through small grassroots donation or a group of larger donors, and that would, if we were able to get that would go towards me being able to dedicate myself to this full time, which, you know, everybody's seen what I've been able to do on a part-time basis. If I could do this full-time and support victims 24/7, I don't think the other side would stand a chance, to be honest with you. And also, we do need to hire a PR firm. It would be nice to have attorneys on retainer. We don't just deal with these issues, but we deal with child abuse issues and CPS issues and domestic violence issues. We do relocate victims and provide safe housing for them, try to get them transportation if they need it. So on top of the political advocacy and governmental advocacy and filing complaints like this, we also do support victims of violent crime on a daily basis.
Wow. That's a story in itself, Jennifer. What's your website again, please?
The victimsrightsreformcouncil.org.
All right. Jennifer Harrison, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, and I hope you get to enjoy the rest of the day.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. Meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.
Less support through telehealth, but it feels overwhelming and rushed? Check out orderlymeds.com now. Orderlymeds.com was built to be different. Here, you connect with real doctors who take the time to understand your goals, review your eligibility, and guide you through a plan that's right for you. Orderly Meds provides access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide, including both name brand options and personalized compound versions when appropriate. So you have choices backed by clinical oversight, not guesswork. It's a simpler, more supportive telehealth experience designed around people who want clarity, care, and confidence in their weight loss journey. And your medication is delivered directly to your home in discreet packaging, so your experience stays private from start to finish. Do your research, ask the right questions, then visit orderlymeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. Again, that's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary, not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.